off the plane from Washington. The Chancellor joins me now. Alistair, darling, thanks very much for being with us. Let's start with Washington. What realistically came out of that is going to affect ordinary people in the coming weeks and months?
I think what was important is that, for the first time in recent memory, you had the leaders of the 20 biggest economies in the world, nearly 80% of the world economy, all of whom were agreed on two things. That firstly, this is the biggest problem that all of us have faced collectively for generations. We have a massive challenge in front of us. The combination of the credit crunch, the high oil and food prices, they've taken a terrible toll on economies across the world. But secondly, there was an agreement that whilst we need to do things in our own countries to support people and to support businesses, it would be so much better if we act together to make sure that we take action, not doing the same thing exactly or necessarily on the same day, but acting together, because that is the best way of ensuring that as we go into this downturn, as many major economies move into recession, we can get through this as quickly as is possible. And I remain confident. If you look at the longer term prospects of the world economy, they are good. But I think the important thing this weekend was you saw a determination to act that frankly wouldn't have been there even a few weeks ago.
A lot of good intention, and we heard a lot of talk before you went about the need for a fiscal stimulus package, which I suppose that if you strip out the wordage means spend more, tax a bit less. Now, in the communique, which I've got here, there's a lot of talk about this is how we could do it, but there's lots of also mentions of as appropriate, i.e., there isn't that much agreement yet on the detail of anything.
No, as I was saying, what you do in each individual country may well be different. For example, if you look at China, for example, last Sunday, they announced bringing forward a lot of spending on capital projects. In Australia, they had more emphasis on the tax side of things.
So then it's not worldwide?
Well, it is, because both, in those two cases, both Australia and China, both are taking action. It will help the economies in that part of the world. Now, what we do, what the Americans do, because we know that possibly President Bush, but certainly President-elect Obama are committed to doing a lot more in the United States. What we do will make a difference. What you actually do from country to country may vary, but if you strip all this back down and say, well, why are you doing it? What difference does it make? Perhaps I put it this way. At a time when the economy slows down, your tax receipts start to fall. If you were then to start cutting spending or trying to get more tax out of people, that would make a difficult situation worse. So what you do is you support the economy by helping businesses, by helping people. You do that, but at the same time, you also remember it's got to be sustainable in the medium term, which means you've got to live within your means.
Fine. So let's talk a bit about the UK economy now, because the Governor of the Bank of England said last week that we already probably are in a recession. Do you share that judgment?
Well, I said when the last figures came out that we're moving into recession. We won't technically know till January, but everybody believes that most major developed countries are moving into recession. What matters, I think, is
that that's a yes.
We're moving into recession. Technically we'll know in January when we get the next set of figures. But the key thing is to plan on the basis that our economy has slowed down. It will continue to slow, I've said we're moving into recession. I've said that on a number of occasions now. The key thing is, what do you do about it? Now, it seems to be you've got a choice. What we seem to be getting on the Tory side now is, well, you don't do anything. They've moved from a position where even a few weeks ago, David Cameron said it was right to let borrowing take the strain. They now seem to be saying something quite different, and the consequences would be very bad for this country. Or you take the view that I take, and that is you support the economy now, whilst at the same time remembering that in the medium term you've got to live within your means.
I want to develop those arguments about spending and borrowing in a minute, but I just want to put it in plain English for our viewers. What does this mean? Does it mean that, for example, unemployment is going to continue to rise over 2 million by Christmas?
What happens when an economy slows down? Factories produce less, businesses do less, then that means that there's less tax coming into the system. But yes, it also means that there will be some people who lose their jobs. But it is also worth bearing this in mind, because I think it's important in relation to jobs. If you look at the figures over the last couple of months, there have been times when almost as many people have come back into the labour market as went out. Now that tells me we need to redouble our efforts, which you've done through the New Deal, through other measures, through Job Centre Plus, of when someone loses their job, let's see if we can help them even before they leave the workplace and get into work. So now, I just make the point because this is one lesson we've got to learn from the 80s and 90s. If we let people come out of work, go onto the dole, onto incapacity benefit, as the Tories used to, that would be disastrous. I believe there are things that we can do that will help ensure that if people do lose their jobs, we help get them back into new jobs as quickly as we can.
I mean, you said in an interview this week that you do have a duty to level with people, and I can't decide whether you're trying to paint a very optimistic picture, oh, it's going to be a short and shallow recession, we'll move on quickly, or whether you think that actually something terrible is coming.
Look, I do think you need to level with people, and you know, and that's why.
So level.
Yeah,
what's coming?
We are going through a very difficult period. But where I am more confident than I was perhaps a few weeks ago is I think there is now every chance that because countries across the world are willing to act together, provided they do that, then we can get through this far more quickly than would otherwise be the case. But, you know, people can see what is going on around them. You know, they can see things are slowing down. On the other hand, you shouldn't lurch from that into a feeling that somehow, you know, it's all terrible and there's nothing that we can do. Governments can make a difference. I mean, I wouldn't be in politics if I didn't believe that. We can make a difference, which is why I reject the Tory view of, you know, you leave people to get on with it themselves. Instead, you help people get through what is a difficult time, and I believe that we can do that, and we will do that.
And tax cuts are part of that.
Look, you're not going to get the pre-budget report out of me today, no matter how hard you try. We'll have to wait a week tomorrow for my projections and also what I propose. But what I can say is this, that when you're in an economic situation like this, it is right to do everything you can to help people get through a difficult period, but it's also right that you do things that will help the country as a whole get through it more quickly than otherwise.
So no detail, I understand that completely. What about the argument, though, and Gordon Brown has more or less said as much, that if we are going to help, it has to be help given quickly, i.e., if there were tax cuts, would it be fair to assume that people would have them in their pay packets by Christmas?
Look, again, I'm not going to get into trailing what we might do or might not do in a week's time, but it is the case that if this is going to work here or anywhere else, you need to do something decisively and you need to do it quickly so it has an effect as quickly as you possibly can. Now, some things take longer to take effect than others, but, you know, for example, I said a few weeks ago that one of the things we're looking at is bringing forward spending on transport projects or schools and so on. That helps because it puts builders to work. It puts the supply industry in a position where they've got orders coming in where that might not otherwise be the case. But the key thing is that you are ready to take the action and that you don't take the Tory view somehow that you just leave people to get on with it.
OK, people will listen very closely to that. That sounds like a yes. That sounds like if there are going to be tax cuts, people will feel it very, very quickly indeed.
You will have to wait and see what I've got to propose in a week's time. It's not long to wait, but you know, you're going to have to.
Right. A question, lots of people have emailed in with lots and lots of questions for you. David Webber said, if tax cuts are introduced as a fiscal stimulus, shouldn't the most responsible approach be to warn people exactly how much taxes may have to rise in future to pay for them when and how the economy begins to boom again?
Well, that is really leads on from what we were talking about earlier. The agreement in Washington yesterday, and my view has always been that you do need to support people, support businesses now, but like every individual, like every business, countries have to live within their means, so that if you put money into the system now, you've got to make sure it's sustainable in the medium term, and I'm very, very clear about that. That is very, very important.